What if the place you felt most alive, the one corner of the world that finally felt like yours, ended up being the very thing your family ripped away? If you've ever fought to claim something for yourself, only to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, stay with me. This story is for you. This isn't just about a house. It's about finding your voice after losing everything you thought was yours and discovering the strength to rebuild from scratch. I'm Emma Lawson. I'm 28 years old, a Seattle-based interior designer with a soft spot for things that look broken, because I see the beauty waiting underneath. I've always believed that with the right light, even the most neglected corners can shine. But I wasn't ready for how dark things would get. Let me take you back to the day I found it, the house. It was a chilly morning in March, the kind of morning where the sun shows up late and weak, filtering through the fog like it's shy. I was driving along Lake Washington, scouting locations for a new client, a dentist with a taste for minimalism and light oak, when I spotted it. Hidden behind a curtain of overgrown wisteria and leaning pine trees was a weather-beaten gate. Faded white paint flaked off the fence like paper ash, and the mailbox was slightly rusted, the number 6113 barely visible, but beyond it, there it stood. A modest two-story craftsman, tired but elegant. Its windows fogged with age, ivy crawling up one side like time trying to take it back. The porch sagged slightly, like a heavy sigh, but I didn't care. My heart pulled toward it before I even touched the steering wheel to park. I got out, gravel crunching under my boots. Damp earth and cedar filled my nose, that unmistakable Pacific Northwest scent. A crow cawed nearby, perched on the power line like a silent witness. I stood in front of the house, breath catching in my throat, not because it was perfect, far from it, but because I could see it, see what it could become. I imagined fresh coats of pale sage on the siding, warm amber lights glowing through sheer curtains, terracotta planters bursting with lavender and rosemary, a hand-painted sign on the gate, Lawson Studio. Not just a home, a statement, my home, my brand, a space that said, Emma was here, and she made something beautiful. I pulled out my phone, snapping a photo from the sidewalk. I didn't even realize my fingers were trembling until I tried to caption it. The start of my American dream. That night, I couldn't stop talking about it. Jake, my boyfriend of 2 years, sat across from me in our tiny apartment's kitchen, stirring marinara as I paced like I'd just discovered a buried treasure. I know it's falling apart, I said, eyes bright, but that's what makes it mine. I can fix it. Turn it into a showroom/home. I've run the numbers, and it's doable. Jake smiled, setting down the spoon. If anyone can turn a haunted-looking shack into a dream, it's you. Just promise me you'll sleep before putting an offer in. I laughed, but inside, I was already planning paint swatches and floorboard replacements. I'd never felt this clear, this sure. The next morning I made the call, scheduled a viewing, met with a real estate agent who warned me the place needed a lot of love. I told her I had plenty to give. A week later, I drained my savings for the down payment. It was terrifying, yes, but it felt right, like I was stepping into the life I'd worked for. That night I called my mom. She answered on the third ring, her voice tired. Emma, everything okay? I smiled into the phone. More than okay, I just bought a house. There was a pause. Not the kind you get when someone's shocked with joy, the kind that makes your stomach tighten. Oh, she said flatly, that's big. I launched into my plans anyway, telling her about the lake view, the fixer-upper charm, how I'd finally have space to grow my business. She listened, but I could hear it, that subtle strain in her voice, like she was waiting to say something else. Are you sure this is the right time, honey? With how things are? Ryan's been struggling lately, and we're not exactly swimming in money. I blinked. I know, but this isn't just a house for me. It's part of my business plan. It's the first thing I've done for me. She didn't respond right away. Then, well, just don't go overboard, okay? Houses don't fix everything. That stung. I didn't call Ryan until the next day. He was half listening as usual, muttering congrats between what sounded like a video game session in the background. He didn't ask any questions, just, you must have saved a lot, that's impressive. Yeah, I replied, a little unsure now. I have. He didn't say anything else. I stared at the phone for a while after we hung up. Jake noticed the shift. He wrapped his arms around me as I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the lights flickering in the distance. "They'll come around," he said softly. "This is your dream. Don't let their hesitation dim it." I nodded, but inside a flicker of doubt curled at the edge of my excitement. Still, that weekend, I stood in front of the lake house with a clipboard and a camera, documenting every angle, every imperfection, not as flaws, but as promises of what could be. I saw potential where others saw decay. I felt hope where others warned caution. I was building something for myself, something real. What I didn't know was that behind my back, someone was already drawing up the blueprints to take it all away. The paint hadn't even dried on the porch railings when the first crack in the foundation appeared. And I'm not talking about the house. I'd invited Mom and Ryan over for dinner at my apartment the weekend after I got the keys. I thought maybe seeing the sketches, the samples, the way my eyes lit up every time I talked about the house, maybe that would bring them in. Maybe it would feel like family. I was wrong. The chicken cacciatore simmered on the stove, scenting the air with garlic, tomato, and rosemary. I'd set the table with mismatched plates and those old wine glasses we'd inherited from Aunt May. Soft jazz hummed from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Jake had lit candles, even though it wasn't a date night. I needed this to go well. I needed them to see me. Mom arrived first. She came straight from work, her coat still damp from the drizzle outside, and dropped her purse onto the entry bench with a sigh. "Smells good," she said, offering a half smile as she pulled off her shoes. Then Ryan walked in behind her, hoodie up, earbuds still in, muttering something about traffic. I tried not to let the knot in my chest tighten. Over dinner, I passed around my design binder. Swatches of fabrics, before and after mock-ups, my hand-drawn floor plans, even a rendering of what the sunroom could look like with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Mom flipped through a few pages, nodding politely. Ryan didn't even open it. Instead, he reached for a second helping and said, "Looks expensive." I laughed nervously. "Well, it's an investment. The house is both my home and my business front. I can host clients there, maybe even workshops once it's done." Mom set her fork down with a soft clink. "That sounds risky, Emma. What happens if it doesn't pan out? You've put your entire savings into this, haven't you?" "I have," I said carefully, meeting her eyes, "because I believe in it, and in myself." She sighed, brushing a strand of graying hair behind her ear. I worry, that's all, especially with Ryan being in a tough spot." I blinked. "What does Ryan have to do with my house?" She gave him a glance. Ryan shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around his glass. "I'm just saying," Mom continued, "we're a family, and when one of us is struggling—" I leaned back slightly, something cold blooming in my chest. "Wait, are you saying I should have given Ryan my down payment instead?" "No one said that," Ryan cut in, finally lifting his gaze. "But yeah, I've been behind. Some investments went bad, and the timing's been rough." "Investments?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "What kind of investments?" He shrugged. "Crypto. Some stocks. Doesn't matter." Mom reached over, placing a hand on his arm. "What matters is that we look out for each other." I stared at the two of them across the table, suddenly feeling like an intruder in my own home. The warmth of the candles, the comfort of the food, it all soured in my mouth. "This isn't about me not caring," I said softly, "but I worked hard for this, for years. I've waited tables, I've taken double shifts, I've saved every cent I could. Not to throw it away, but to build something." "You're always so defensive," Mom said, her tone clipped now. "I'm just trying to remind you what matters. Family first." That phrase, family first, it landed like a stone in my stomach. Jake reached under the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze, grounding me. After dessert, they left quickly. No hugs, no, "I'm proud of you." Just a quiet goodbye and the sound of the elevator closing. I stood by the sink, rinsing dishes I hadn't touched. The hum of the faucet filled the silence. Jake leaned against the counter, watching me. "You okay?" I shook my head slowly. "They think I'm selfish." He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting lightly on my shoulder. "They don't understand what this means to you, but I do." I wanted to believe that was enough. I really did. But later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, I couldn't stop hearing Mom's voice in my head. What about helping Ryan? He's in a tough spot. Was I wrong to chase something for myself? To not bend every dream around their needs? I thought back to my childhood, to how Mom always made excuses for Ryan's outbursts, his skipped classes, the money that went missing from Dad's desk drawer. I thought of how I was the stable one, the one who didn't need as much, the one expected to understand. My jaw clenched, teeth pressing hard. Maybe I was being selfish. Or maybe I was finally choosing myself. Still, doubt crept in like mold under wallpaper, quiet, slow, but impossible to ignore once you noticed it. The next morning, I walked into the lake house with Jake. We'd planned to measure the living room and take some photos before demo day. But I just stood in the doorway for a long time, my boots rooted to the dusty wood floor. Sunlight filtered through cracked blinds, casting long, angled shadows across the faded carpet. The air smelled like old pine and damp insulation. Jake called out from the kitchen, "You good, Em?" I looked around and whispered to no one, "Tell me this is worth it." Because part of me, the part raised to put everyone else first, had started to wonder. What if they were right? What if I had gone too far? What if building something for myself meant losing my family completely? I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. It started with a voicemail. I'd been at the lake house all morning, covered in plaster dust and paint chips, smoothing drywall in the kitchen while the windows fogged from the cold air outside. I'd left my phone on the windowsill with the ringer off. When I picked it up at lunch, there was a missed call from Heather, my realtor, and a message. "Hey, Emma, just a quick heads up. I got confirmation that the lake house has officially closed with Mr. Thompson. He's excited to start renovations. Hope everything's good on your end." I froze. Mr. Thompson? Closed? I replayed the message 3 times, convinced I'd misheard. I hadn't. The name didn't mean anything to me. The house was already mine. The paperwork was signed. My name was on the title. I had the keys. I called her back immediately, pacing the hallway, heart thudding against my ribs like it wanted out. "Heather? What do you mean closed? The house was already closed. With me." There was a long pause on the other end. I heard her clicking through something. "Wait, hold on. Didn't you back out? I was told the deposit was refunded." "No, I didn't back out. I never told anyone to refund anything." Another pause. "Emma, I saw your signature on the rescind notice." My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit on the edge of the staircase to keep from collapsing. "My signature?" I whispered. "Heather, I didn't sign anything." She sounded nervous now. "I mean, the forms had your name, your info. It looked legitimate. I assumed—" "I didn't sign anything," I said again, louder this time, panic rising. I hung up without saying goodbye. I immediately opened my banking app, hands trembling so badly I mistyped the password twice. When it finally logged in, I saw it. The full down payment, returned and marked as deposit reversal. It had landed 2 days ago. I hadn't even noticed. I'd been so buried in plaster samples and renovation sketches. I called the title company next, then the bank. The answer was always the same. The paperwork had gone through. Emma Lawson had withdrawn the offer. The house had been sold to someone else. I couldn't breathe. Jake tried to calm me down. He brought water, rubbed my back as I sat in stunned silence on the edge of the bed, still wearing paint-splattered jeans. None of it made sense, unless I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetie." "Did you do something with the house?" I asked, skipping hello. A pause. "Emma," my voice cracked. "Mom, tell me you didn't touch anything. Tell me this isn't you." Another pause. Then she exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath. "I had to," she said quietly. "You weren't thinking clearly." The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" She went on, her voice even and maddeningly calm. "Ryan's debt was getting worse. He was in real trouble, Emma. That house was too much for you, too much risk. You needed someone to step in before you ruined everything." I felt cold, like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You forged my signature?" "I helped, sweetheart. I just redirected things. You'll thank me one day. You stole my dream, I whispered. You had no right. You think I wanted to? She snapped, suddenly emotional. I did it for the family, for Ryan. He could have lost everything. We all could have. I hung up. I didn't want to hear another word. I drove straight to the house. The sun was setting by the time I got there. The air smelled like wet pine needles and something burning in the distance. A soft wind blew across the lake, making the surface ripple like it was flinching. And there it was, a bright red "Sold" sign, tilted slightly in the soft earth. The porch lights were off. The gate creaked when I touched it. I walked up the steps slowly, boots scuffing against chipped paint and loose nails. I didn't cry, not right away. I just stood there. My hands were shaking. My throat burned. It felt like mourning a death that hadn't been announced yet. The death of something I built from scratch, believed in when no one else did. Jake had followed in his car. He found me sitting on the porch, arms wrapped around my knees, staring blankly at the garden I never got to fix. He crouched down beside me. "Talk to me." I handed him my phone. The text to my mother still open. Just one line. "My family stole my future." He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and held my hand. I kept picturing every brushstroke, every floorboard, every beam I'd measured, erased, gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, tracing the ceiling patterns with my eyes like they were constellations that might still lead me somewhere. The betrayal was so complete, so casual, she hadn't even hesitated. My own mother, my own brother. They'd decided my dream was negotiable, that my life was negotiable, and I didn't know what hurt more, the house being gone, or realizing that maybe I never really had a family, just people who expected me to sacrifice. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone again. That red "Sold" sign was burned into my memory. I couldn't get it back, not yet, not legally, not without proof. But one thing was certain now. This wasn't over, not even close. My tires hissed across wet asphalt as I tore through the quiet Seattle streets, wipers beating a frantic rhythm against sheets of late April rain. Mom's neighborhood sat on a gentle hill of modest bungalows, porches sagging under moss-slick railings, wind chimes clinking like nervous teeth. I parked crooked at the curb, engine still sputtering, breath already fogging the windshield. "Don't calm down," I told myself. "They need to feel every ounce of this fury." I slammed the car door hard enough to make the porch light flicker. Water pooled in the cracks of the brick walk. Each step sent cold spray up my jeans. Mom opened the front door before I knocked. Maybe she'd been waiting, or maybe Ryan's frantic text had warned her. Either way, she looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a pale cardigan, hair pulled back too tight. "Emma, honey, come in out of the rain before you catch—" "Save it," I snapped, brushing past her into the living room. The house smelled like lemon polish and something burned, probably the pot roast she'd forgotten in the oven. Family photos lined the mantel, my kindergarten smile, Ryan's Little League trophy pose, one of Dad in his faded UW sweatshirt. Tonight they felt like silent jurors. Mom shut the door softly. "Let's sit and talk like adults." I whirled on her. "Adults don't forge signatures." My voice cracked, raw from shouting in the car. "Adults don't sell their daughter's future behind her back." She flinched, but only for a heartbeat. Then her mouth set in that thin, patient line she used when I refused vegetables as a kid. "I protected you. That house was going to drown you in debt." Across the room, Ryan hovered, hands buried in hoodie pockets, eyes glued to the floorboards. A stack of unopened mail, red letters stamped "past due," peeked from the coffee table like guilty secrets. I took a step toward him. "You knew." He swallowed. His shoulders hunched inward as if bracing for a punch. "Mom said it was the only way," he muttered. "She said you'd forgive us once you calmed down." "Forgive you?" My laugh came out sharp, metallic. "Ryan, you let her steal everything I've worked for because you couldn't pay your gambling debts?" His head snapped up. "They weren't just gambling." Mom sliced the air with one hand. "Enough. Emma, you're choosing the wrong battle. We're family. We fix things together." I felt heat climb my neck. Cinematic environment. The radiator clanged in the corner, spitting steam. Somewhere a faucet dripped, steady as a ticking bomb. Rain hammered the windows like a crowd demanding entry. "Together?" I said. You didn't even call me before cutting the deal. You replaced my name with yours like erasing a typo." Mom sighed, moving to straighten a photo frame that was already straight. Microaction. Her fingers lingered on the glass, thumb rubbing circles as if polishing away guilt. "You always dramatize, Emma. It's just a house. You can design another." "Just a house," I echoed, tasting the bitterness. "You taught me to dream small, and when I finally ignored you, you burned the blueprint." Ryan stepped forward, voice shaking. "Look, I messed up, but Mom was scared. The collectors—" Mom shot him a warning glance. He wilted. Inner monologue. She controls him with fear the way she tries to control me with guilt. I turned back to her. "Did Dad know you were capable of this before he died? Or is betrayal your new hobby?" Color drained from her cheeks. "Don't you dare bring your father into this. He would have put family first." "No," I said, pacing in front of the fireplace, fingers grazing the cool stone. "He would have believed in me." Her jaw tightened, temples pulsing. "You abandoned us the second you chose that lake house over Ryan's crisis." I stared, stunned. "Abandoned? I offered him a loan last year. He vanished for months. How many chances am I supposed to give before I'm allowed my own life?" Silence stretched, thick as cobwebs. The wall clock ticked louder than my heartbeat. At last, Mom whispered, "You've always thought you were better. Off in your fancy design world while we pick up the pieces." Physical expression. Her shoulders drew back, eyes glassy, not with sorrow, but with offended dignity. She'll never admit she's wrong. I exhaled through my nose, steadying the quake inside my chest. "I'm done arguing." I pulled a folded sheet from my back pocket, the email Heather had forwarded, showing Mom's forged rescind notice. I laid it on the coffee table, right atop the overdue bills. "That's criminal fraud. I could press charges." Ryan's face went ghost white. "Emma, please." Mom skimmed the page, lips twitching. "Go ahead. Drag us through court. Humiliate your own family. Is that what you want the world to see?" Short, sharp dialogue spun like knives. "Truth beats image. Image is survival." "Not anymore." I picked up my coat from the armchair. My hands were steady now. Anger had cooled into something harder, sharper, resolve. "I'll be staying at Jake's," I said, buttoning the collar. "If you need to contact me, do it through my lawyer." Mom's laugh was brittle. "Lawyer? Over a misunderstanding?" "Over a theft," I corrected, staring her down until the smile slipped from her face. Ryan reached out, fingertips barely grazing my sleeve. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't want to." I met his eyes, storm gray and rimmed with regret, and for a heartbeat I saw the brother who used to build blanket forts with me. But the memory crumbled under the weight of everything he'd let happen. I stepped back. His arm fell, limp. At the door I paused, listening to the rain drum the porch roof, louder now like applause for the closing act. I looked over my shoulder one last time. Mom stood in the hallway light, edges haloed by the glow, face unreadable. Ryan slumped on the couch, head in his hands. Inner monologue. Let them sit with the silence they created. Outside, cold air slapped my cheeks awake. I dialed Sarah Hayes, college roommate turned real estate attorney, thumb hovering for half a ring before she answered. "Emma, everything okay?" "Not even close," I said, voice low but clear. "I need you to look at a forged signature and a fraudulent sale. Tonight." A beat of charged quiet. Then, "Send me everything. We'll start with the title company first thing in the morning." "Thank you." I ended the call and leaned against my car, rain matting my hair, soaking through my coat. Streetlights cast puddles and rust-orange halos. Water rippled like restless thoughts. My reflection stared back, tired, furious, unbroken. I whispered to it, "They think this is over." Thunder rumbled in the distance, answering like a promise. "It's only just begun." The next morning, I sat in Sarah's office staring at my own forged signature. It was scrawled across a scanned PDF on her dual monitors, my name in ink that wasn't mine, in a style that mimicked my hand but missed something essential, like a mask with the wrong eyes. Sarah leaned forward, frowning, her glasses sliding halfway down her nose. "Yeah," she said, tapping the screen with a pen. "Whoever did this was sloppy. They didn't match your strokes. Look, see how the loops tighten here? That's a tell. You don't write like this." The room smelled faintly of printer toner and peppermint. Rain pattered softly against the high windows, filtered light casting silver across the legal documents stacked beside her keyboard. My fingers curled tightly around the fabric of my coat, still damp from the night before. The edge of my thumb scraped over the raw skin beneath my cuticle. Sarah exhaled. "They used your financial documents too. Pay stubs, tax filings. Someone had full access." "Someone in my family," I said, though the words barely made it above a whisper. She nodded grimly. "And they sold the property to this guy, Benjamin Thompson, local investor, buys up distressed homes. But this whole deal hinged on that forged rescind letter. If we can prove it was fraud, we have leverage." My chest burned. Not from anger this time, from the feeling of being so exposed. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd taken pieces of me, private papers, trust. "They broke into my life," I said, "and made it theirs." Sarah looked me in the eye. "Then let's take it back." She handed me a manila folder. Inside were printouts, emails between my mother and Mr. Thompson, including one where she pitched him the property directly, claiming she could facilitate access despite her daughter's emotional attachments. My stomach flipped. I felt like I was reading about a stranger. "Emotional attachments," I said bitterly. "It was my life." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "She used your business plan, Emma. Look, this attachment she forwarded, that's your original proposal for Lawson Studio. She even renamed the file." My mouth went dry. I couldn't look away from the screen. I remembered the day I drafted that proposal. Jake had brought me tea while I sat cross-legged on the couch, tapping out my mission statement, transforming forgotten spaces into places of belonging. And now here it was, stripped of my name and sent to a real estate developer like a freebie pitch deck. Micro-action. My hands balled into fists in my lap. I didn't even realize until I felt my nails digging into my palm. "She stole my vision," I murmured. Sarah rested a hand gently on the folder. "We can build a case, but I need everything. Texts, photos, anything showing your original intentions. We'll start with a cease and desist, then prepare for civil action." I nodded. Slowly. It felt like breathing through gauze. Later that afternoon, I drove to Aunt Clara's. Clara had always been the quiet one in the family. My dad's younger sister, a retired nurse with a garden full of wind chimes and succulents, and eyes that had seen more than they said. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just handed me a cup and said, "I figured it was time." Her kitchen was warm, cluttered, filled with little reminders of a simpler world. Knitted potholders, newspaper clippings, an old cuckoo clock that hadn't chimed since 2004. "I always knew your mom was controlling," she said after I told her everything. "But this is beyond her usual games." I stared at the chipped rim of my mug. "Was she always like this, even with Dad?" Clara nodded slowly, fingers wrapping around her tea. "She hid things, money mostly. Your dad let her manage the bills, and she manipulated what he knew. When he got sick, I tried to step in, but she shut me out." I looked up sharply. "She hid things from him?" "She moved money from your college fund to cover Ryan's first rehab stint. Never told you, never told your dad. Said it was all in the name of keeping the family whole." The words hit like a gut punch. I had wondered why I'd needed loans for that final year. She'd told me the fund had run dry. I closed my eyes. Inner monologue. How much of my life has been written in her handwriting, not mine? Clara reached over and placed an old envelope in my hands. "Your dad wrote this the week before he passed. I was supposed to give it to you if anything ever felt wrong." I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper, the edges worn. His handwriting slanted and familiar. "Emma, don't ever shrink your dreams to fit someone else's idea of safety, especially not your mother's. Fight for the things that make you feel alive. Love, Dad." I wiped at my eyes with my sleeve, chest shaking. It was the first time I'd cried since the house was stolen. Not out of rage, but from the ache of remembering I'd once had someone who believed in me, without conditions. That night, I met Ryan at a dingy cafe downtown. He looked like he hadn't slept. His hoodie hung loose over his frame, and his fingers trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee. "You didn't have to come," he said without looking up. "I didn't," I replied, "but I need answers." He sighed. "She told me if we didn't do it, the house would ruin you, that you'd sink, that I'd be responsible if you failed." I watched him carefully. "She controls you," I said. He nodded. "She always has." "Why didn't you stop her?" "Because I owed her everything," he said, "but now I think maybe that was the trap." He slid a napkin across the table. On it was a scribbled address. "There's a storage unit, some of Dad's files, stuff she never let me see. I think there's more." Micro-action. I folded the napkin gently, tucked it into my coat. "I'm going to find the truth," I said, "with or without you." He looked up, eyes rimmed with regret. "Just be careful. She doesn't lose quietly." As I walked into the Seattle night, city lights reflecting off puddles like fractured stars, I felt the ache of exhaustion, but also something new, conviction. I wasn't a victim anymore, and I wasn't alone, because somewhere out there, the truth was waiting, and this time, I wasn't afraid to face it. The next morning, I stood outside the lake house in the drizzle, staring through the chain-link fence that had gone up almost overnight. Mr. Thompson had wasted no time. A fresh construction permit hung crookedly near the mailbox. The porch had already been stripped, my porch, and a contractor's van idled in the gravel driveway. It was like watching someone repaint over my soul. I pulled out my phone, heart hammering. My thumb hovered over the record button. Part of me hesitated. What would it even matter? What could I possibly say that would undo what my own family had already decided for me? But then I thought of my dad's letter, of Ryan's whisper in that cafe, of the cold, practiced way my mother had erased me from my own life. Inner monologue. They told me to stay quiet, to be grateful, to keep peace. No more. I hit record. The camera framed me in front of the chain-link fence. My eyes were puffy, rain clinging to my lashes, hair pulled back in a messy knot. I didn't script it. I didn't polish anything. "Hi," I began, voice shaky. "My name is Emma Lawson. I'm an interior designer based in Seattle, and this house behind me was supposed to be my dream." I turned the camera briefly to show the building, then back to my face. "I bought this house with my own savings. It was supposed to be my home and my business, a space I'd been planning for years, but someone I trusted took that away from me." My throat tightened. I swallowed. "They forged my signature, used my documents, sold it behind my back to an investor, and now I'm standing outside the fence of the house I still have the key to." I took a shaky breath. If you've ever had something stolen from you, by people who claimed they were protecting you, then you know this feeling. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing this because I don't want to stay silent anymore. Then I lifted my sketchbook into frame, the first drawing I'd ever made of the house, my handwriting curling beneath the ink lines. This was mine, and I want it back. I ended the video and uploaded it to Instagram with the caption, "I didn't expect much. A few friends, maybe a couple former clients, but by the time I got back to Jake's apartment and opened my laptop, the post had exploded. Within hours it had over 8,000 shares. Comments poured in from people I'd never met. My sister did the same thing when my dad passed. You're not alone. This happened to my aunt in Michigan. She still hasn't recovered. You're brave for speaking out. We're with you." Some people offered legal advice. Others sent coffee money, saying, "For the fighter in you." I even received a DM from a woman named Hannah in New York who said, "My story started just like yours. I never got my house back, but I found something better. Keep fighting." It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel completely alone. Even local news picked up the story. A Seattle outlet reached out asking for an interview. Jake helped me set up a makeshift camera rig in our tiny living room, and I shared everything: the forged documents, the betrayal, the plans that were never supposed to be erased. Then something truly unexpected happened. Mr. Thompson contacted me. I was sitting at Jake's kitchen table when his email popped up. The subject line read, "About the house." I clicked it, heart in my throat. "Hi, Emma. I saw your video and read the news article. I had no idea the sale was done under false pretenses. I'd like to meet. Let's talk." Benjamin Thompson. For a moment I didn't move, just sat there, screen glowing, the smell of Jake's burnt toast lingering in the background. Jake leaned over my shoulder. "That's big." "Yeah," I breathed. "It is." We met 2 days later at a cafe near Pike Place Market, public, neutral, surrounded by latte foam and the buzz of distant tourists. Mr. Thompson was in his early 50s, tall, dressed in jeans and a Patagonia vest. He looked tired, like a man who'd spent too much time flipping things he never intended to keep. "I didn't know," he said, sitting down across from me. "I don't typically get involved in family matters. I buy homes through attorneys and trust the paperwork. But this feels wrong." I slid a copy of the forged rescind letter across the table. "That's not my signature." He scanned it, frowning. "You have a case." "I have more than that," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I have a community now, and a platform, and momentum." He tapped the edge of the paper. "If you file suit, this gets ugly. Legal costs, delays, reputational risk." I didn't flinch. "You know what's uglier? Letting a family steal a woman's life and calling it business?" He studied me, then nodded slowly. "I'll talk to my lawyer. We'll see what can be done." I left the cafe with my hands in my pockets and the Seattle wind chasing the scent of espresso through the streets. That night I posted again. Just a photo, me holding the blueprint sketch, standing outside the fence. The caption read, "But not everyone was happy." My mother called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. Then came the voicemail. "Emma, how dare you drag our family name through the mud like this? Your grandmother saw that news piece. Ryan's coworkers are asking questions. Are you proud of yourself? You always did need an audience." Inner monologue. There it was again, the real voice behind the mother mask. Control, not concern. I texted back only one sentence. "You lost the right to silence me when you stole from me." I blocked her number after that. That same night, I got an email from a woman named Maria in Oregon. "I was raised by a narcissist too. Speaking out is the most terrifying and the most healing thing I've ever done. Keep going." The floodgates were open, and this time, I wasn't drowning. I was moving with the current. The world was watching, and I was finally ready to speak louder. Because the truth had power, especially when shared. But even as I gained allies, something told me the war at home had just begun, and the next knock on my door would come from the last person I expected. It was just past midnight when the knock came. 3 slow thuds, spaced apart like someone working up the courage between each one. Jake was asleep, curled into the crook of our couch, the soft hum of late-night jazz playing from the kitchen speaker. I froze in the hallway, toothbrush still in hand, foam clinging to the corner of my mouth. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not at this hour. Then came another knock, lighter, more hesitant. I opened the door to find Ryan standing there, soaked to the bone. His hoodie clung to his frame, rain dripping from the tip of his nose, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually, like someone whose armor had finally rusted away. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. He entered slowly, gaze dropping to the floor as he passed. The apartment lights painted soft shadows across his face. His jaw twitched. Hands shook. He didn't sit. "Jake's asleep," I said quietly, pulling my robe tighter. "I won't stay long," he mumbled. I couldn't keep this in anymore. I folded my arms, watching him. "Then start talking." He ran both hands through his wet hair, pacing the living room like a trapped animal. "I messed up, Emma, more than you know." My arms stayed crossed, but something inside me softened, just a hairline crack. Maybe it was the storm in his voice. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time, he wasn't blaming anyone else. "Sit down," I said, "and don't lie." He sank into the edge of the armchair, elbows on knees, shoulders curled like he was bracing for impact. "Mom didn't just ask me to go along with the house thing. She planned it with me, weeks before you even got the keys." Micro-action. My fingers clenched around the fabric belt of my robe. I didn't interrupt. "I was in deep," he said. "Not just with rent or student loans. I was in with bookies, online casinos. I used your Netflix account to set up profiles for fake identities. I've been gambling since college. I'd get ahead, then lose it all, over and over." My heart pounded, but I kept still. She found out when one of the guys came to the house last year. She didn't get mad. She didn't even cry. She said, "Let's find a way to clean this up before Emma gets wind of it." He swallowed hard. I thought she meant we'd get me help, a plan. But she meant leverage. She said if you bought that house, you'd be vulnerable. You'd need a lot of permits, paperwork. She still had access to Dad's old files. She knew exactly where your financial docs were, and He looked up. His eyes, red and raw, met mine. I went along with it. The clock ticked behind us. Somewhere outside, a car splashed through a puddle. "I told myself you were strong," he whispered, "that you'd bounce back. But that wasn't why I did it. I did it because I was scared. Scared of what would happen if I didn't let her take control again, and scared of what it would cost me if I defied her." I felt the heat of my own rage rise in my chest, and the sting of grief just beneath it. Inner monologue. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but mostly I wanted to crawl back in time and rip my signature off every memory we shared. "You let her sell my house to cover your addiction," I said, "and you watched me fall apart like it didn't matter." "I know," he said, voice cracking. "That's why I started going to meetings last week. For real this time. I signed up under my own name, told the truth for the first time in years." Physical expression. His hands shook. His shoulders trembled, not from cold but shame, raw, unfiltered. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I brought this." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded paper, a printed document, a statement of admission, names, dates, accounts, even a timeline of when he accessed my financial files from Mom's house. "I'll testify," he said. "I'll put it all on record. I'll tell the court how she manipulated the sale and how I helped." I stared at the paper, heart a snarl of fury and ache. "Why now?" I asked, voice low. "Because I watched your video," he said. And for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. I felt ashamed. He stood slowly, setting the paper on the coffee table between us like a peace offering. "I know it's not enough," he said, "but it's the only honest thing I've got left." As he reached the door, I spoke without meaning to. "What did she say when you told her you were coming here?" He turned, one hand on the knob. "She told me I was betraying the family." I nodded, bitter. "Of course she did. But this time," his voice steadied, "I think I'm okay with that." The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood in the middle of the room, unsure whether to cry, scream, or crumple. Instead, I sat. I stared at the document, at the time-stamped evidence of everything they did, every signature, every stolen moment. My breath trembled in my chest. And yet, beneath the weight of betrayal, there was something else blooming. Relief. Ryan had cracked. Mom's grip was slipping. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I posted again that night, just a photo, my hand holding the admission document, thumb smudged with ink. The caption read, "One voice turned into two, and two voices can burn down a lie." The comments poured in louder than ever, but I knew this wasn't over, because if Ryan was stepping forward, my mother was about to strike back. The invitation arrived on pale blue stationery, the kind Grandma Evelyn kept in her china hutch for graduations and condolences, never family wars. The cursive ink trembled just enough to show her hands still shook when she thought of what we'd become. Sunday, 4 p.m., supper. No excuses. Love, Grandma. 3 fainter words hovered underneath, almost erased. Work this out. I folded the note twice, slipped it into my pocket, and felt that familiar mix of dread and resolve, like stepping into a gut renovation reveal that could make a client cry happy tears or sue me. Except this time the debris was our history, and the house I stood to lose was my family. Jake offered to come, hand warm on the small of my back, but I shook my head. "I have to do this alone," I said, lifting the battered leather portfolio stuffed with proof, emails, bank statements, Ryan's signed confession. My armor was paper, yet it felt heavier than steel. Grandma's place perched on a magnolia bluff, clapboard siding sea foam green since the 60s. Wind chimes tinkled in the salty breeze, rhododendrons sagged under late spring blooms. For a moment I pretended it was an ordinary Sunday, Roast chicken in the oven, Mariner's game on low, Grandma humming Patsy Cline. Then the front door creaked open and the spell broke. Inside, the living room felt smaller than I remembered. Lamps dimmed, lace curtains drawn against gray afternoon light, air thick with roast and tension. Aunt Clara sat on the floral sofa clutching a notebook, knuckles white. Ryan hovered by the fireplace, shoulders squared but eyes darting like a cornered deer. Mom stood near the piano, spine rigid, pearl earrings gleaming like warning lights. Grandma gave me a fragile smile. Coat off, shoes off, truth on the table. Her voice wavered, but her water blue eyes meant business. I stepped onto the rug where we once built Lego kingdoms. "Before we begin," I said, unclipping the portfolio, "thank you for coming." My voice shook, so I focused on the carpet fibers under my toes. "What happens today decides whether we move forward as a family or watch everything crumble." Mom scoffed, arms folding. "Dramatic as always." I ignored her, sliding the first document onto the coffee table, a certified handwriting analysis. The black and white printout looked clinical against Grandma's embroidered doily. "This proves my signature on the rescind letter was forged," I said, tapping the highlighted discrepancies. "Stroke pressure, slant angle, pen lifts, none match mine." Aunt Clara leaned in, glasses low on her nose. Ryan stared at the floor. Mom's jaw twitched. Next, I laid out the email thread between Mom and Mr. Thompson. Her words glared up like neon. "Facilitate access. Urgent financial necessity. My daughter is emotionally unstable." Heat flooded my cheeks. "That's how you described me," I said, "like a liability you needed to manage." Mom inhaled sharply. "Those words are taken out of context?" I finished. "Here's more context." I produced Ryan's confession, his signature blotchy where tears had fallen while he signed. Ryan cleared his throat, finally lifting his gaze. "Everything Emma's saying is true. Mom orchestrated the sale. I helped because I was drowning in debt and too scared to tell anyone." His voice cracked, but he pushed on. "I'm in recovery now. I'm owning it." Mom's shoulders jerked back like a marionette yanked by unseen strings. "So this is your grand performance?" she hissed. "Gang up on me for internet applause?" Grandma's cane thumped the hardwood. "Linda," she said, Mom's full name landing like a gavel, "let Emma finish." I faced Mom. My hands shook, papers rustling like dry leaves, yet I held her gaze. "You always preach sacrifice," I said. "But sacrifice isn't stealing someone's dream to pay another's debts. That's control." For a heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. Regret? Fear? Then the mask slid back. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her tone sharpened. "I did what any mother would do to protect her son." "To protect him," I said, voice low. "You destroyed me." "He needed saving. So did I." She opened her mouth, but only a shuddering breath emerged. Grandma smoothed the doily, her small rebellion against chaos, then spoke, voice thin but unwavering. "Linda, I covered for you when you hid credit card bills from your husband. I covered when you borrowed from my annuity to bail Ryan out the first time, but forging your own daughter's name ends today." Mom's tears turned to ice. "You'd take her side over mine?" "This isn't sides," Aunt Clara said, closing her notebook. "It's right and wrong." Ryan stepped forward, voice rough. "Mom, I let you control me for years. If you love me, you'll stop now." The words hung like fragile glass. Mom swayed, one hand gripping the piano for balance. I gathered the papers. "Sarah files for an injunction tomorrow. Mr. Thompson has agreed to pause renovations until the court rules." I exhaled. "If you cooperate, admit wrongdoing, and turn over the rest of the documents, I'll consider mediation." Mom's gaze flicked from face to face, searching for an ally. Finding none, she wrapped her cardigan tighter, pearls rising and falling with each rapid breath. "I need time," she whispered. "You've had months," I said gently. "Take a step now." A gust rattled the stained glass pane in the front door, a reminder that storms don't wait for permission. Grandma stood. "Linda, you'll stay for supper. Emma, Ryan, Clara, help me in the kitchen." It wasn't a request, it was an anchor. In the cramped galley kitchen, steam from mashed potatoes fogged the window. Ryan mashed in silence, tears dropping into the pot. Aunt Clara set plates with steady hands. I whisked gravy, time rising like memory. Beyond the doorway, Mom remained in the living room, shoulders shaking in muted sobs. My own chest tightened, not with anger, but with the ache of possibility. Dinner was quiet, each clink of cutlery a tentative truce. Halfway through, Mom's fork paused midair. "I'm sorry," she said, voice splintering. "I don't know how to undo what I did, but I'll try." Hope flickered, and caution steadied me. "Trying starts with truth," I replied. She nodded once, tears falling unchecked. After dishes, Grandma pressed an old Polaroid into my palm. Dad, Mom, Ryan, and me building a sandcastle on Alki Beach. Grandma's handwriting on the back read, "Start again, but stronger." On the porch, dusk painted the sky in bruised purple and ember pink. Ryan rested a hand on the railing like a pledge. "Thank you," he murmured. "We're not done," I said, sliding the Polaroid into my jacket. "But we're finally on the same side." The wind carried the distant call of a ferry horn. I looked toward city lights shimmering across Elliott Bay, the promise of injunctions, negotiations, and slow forgiveness. The truth was out. Mom's power was breaking, but reclaiming the house was only the first step, because Dawn would decide whether victory finally felt like home, or just the opening bell for the next battle. I stood on the porch of the lake house again, this time without the "sold" sign mocking me from the garden. The air smelled like promise, cool with early morning dew, pine sap, and the faint smoke of distant fireplaces. In my hand was a single silver key. Sarah had called that morning just after sunrise, voice breathless. "We did it. The court ruled in our favor. The fraudulent sale is void. Thompson's agreed to transfer the title back at original cost." For a moment I didn't move. The phone stayed pressed against my ear long after the call ended, as if my brain needed more time than my body to understand the words. It was over. No, it was beginning. Mr. Thompson met me at the title office. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were softer than before. He slid the folder across the table. "I hope you turn it into something beautiful," I smiled. "I will." He paused. "Most people don't fight this hard for a house." I met his gaze. It was never just a house. That week I shared the news in a post, just me standing on the front porch holding the key up to the sunlight. Caption: "Dreams can be stolen, but they can also be taken back. The lake house is mine again. Let's build something real." The post went viral again, but this time it wasn't just messages of sympathy. It was offers. Local clients reached out. Designers I'd once interned for offered donated materials. A custom cabinetry studio I'd admired since college sent a DM. "We saw your story. Would love to partner on your kitchen." Even strangers stepped in. A woman from Spokane mailed me a $50 Home Depot gift card with a handwritten note. "Because your fight lit a fire in me." Jake printed every message and pinned them to a board in the living room of our apartment. "Your wall of warriors," he called it. The renovations began the following Monday. Dust filled the air like confetti, sunlight slicing through it in golden beams. I tore out the rotted carpet with my own hands. Jake and I painted walls by moonlight, white with sage undertones that made the room feel like spring was trying to start again. I sketched blueprints at night, legs curled beneath me, coffee always growing cold beside the laptop. I named each room with purpose: the reflection room, the breakthrough office, the healing entryway. Every corner, every nail, every coat of paint was mine. Micro-actions. My fingers moved with confidence now. No hesitation in the brush strokes. No trembling when I held the tape measure. I'd never felt so clear. But clarity didn't mean I wasn't tired. Money was still tight. The lawsuit had drained most of what little I'd saved after the initial down payment was stolen. One evening, Jake found me at the dining table, staring at a spreadsheet like it might rearrange itself into something better. "We're short," I said, "by at least 10 grand. I've maxed the business credit line." He pulled up a chair beside me. "Then let's ask for help." I hesitated. "I've asked enough." So I launched a crowdfunding campaign, not as a victim, as a creator. The video was short, 1 minute of before and after sketches over soft piano music. My voice over it: "This house is more than walls and windows. It's a place where people can feel safe, seen, and inspired. I'm building a studio that helps others reclaim their space, inside and out, And I'd love for you to be part of it. We hit $10,000 in 2 days, then $20,000. Support came from everywhere: former clients, new fans, fellow survivors of family betrayal. One woman donated $500 and commented, "For every woman who was told her dream was too big, build it anyway." I cried at that one. With the money secured, I applied for a small business loan and was approved. I stood in front of the empty living room and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like years. The sun filtered through new glass, casting warm lines across the floorboards I'd chosen myself. I could smell fresh wood and the faint lemon of polished tile. Inner monologue. This isn't a comeback, it's a declaration. I sent the final floor plan to the printer. Jake framed it and hung it near the entryway. The words at the top: Lawson Studio, where healing lives. We celebrated with pizza on the front steps, cardboard boxes balanced on our knees, the lake shimmering behind us. Jake leaned over and whispered, "You did it." I looked around, at the lantern light strung across the porch, the space that no longer echoed with ghosts. "I am doing it," I corrected. The next day, I stood barefoot in the finished sunroom, the same one I had once only imagined. The light wrapped around me like a promise. I pulled out my phone and texted Jake, "I did it. This is my home now." I didn't expect the tears, but they came anyway, slow, silent, not of sadness, but release. Not all endings need fireworks. Some come like morning, quiet, steady, full of new beginnings. Later that night, Ryan showed up with a box under his arm. He looked better, healthier, a glow behind his eyes that had been missing for years. "Peace offering," he said, handing me the box. Inside was a wooden sign he'd carved himself, hand-lettered in dark ink, "The House That Wouldn't Quit." Micro-action. I held the sign against my chest and nodded, unable to speak. He looked around, hands in his pockets. "It's beautiful, Em. You really made it yours." I turned toward him. "You helped, more than you know." He gave a half smile. "I'm getting there." That night, I lit a single candle in the hallway window, a small ritual for all that had been lost, and all I'd found. But even as I breathed in the peace of that moment, I knew the story wasn't done. Because dreams don't just end when you reach them. They grow. And as I looked toward the future, I realized there was still one part of my life I hadn't fully rebuilt. The people inside it. The opening felt nothing like the ribbon-cutting ceremonies I'd designed for clients. No red carpet, no glossy step and repeat, just a Saturday breeze rolling off Lake Washington, the smell of sawdust still clinging to the baseboards, and a cluster of 23 people milling in the front yard with paper cups of drip coffee. Yet when I pulled the French doors wide and let them step into my finished showroom, the collective gasp felt louder than any marching band. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed skylight, washing over oak floors that held a buttery glow. The walls, soft clay white, seemed to breathe, while brushed brass sconces flickered like candle flames against the plaster. In the center stood a 12-foot farmhouse table, its live edge preserved beneath clear resin. On top, I'd laid out design boards, kitchens in desert neutrals, nurseries awash in sea glass blues, a studio apartment wrapped in bold emerald velvet. Everything I'd fought for radiated back at me. A local blogger whispered to her photographer, "It's like stepping inside a calm heartbeat." I smoothed an invisible wrinkle from my blazer sleeve, pulse thudding at my throat, unsure if anyone could see it jump. Jake hovered beside the refreshments, offering bite-sized lemon bars our neighbor had baked. He flashed me a private thumbs up. In that moment, every splinter, every night of floor sanding, every letter drafted by lawyers felt worthwhile. A client I'd once lost to a bigger firm shook my hand. "I've been following your story," she said, eyes bright. "I have a lake cottage that needs this kind of soul. Let's talk." By noon, my inbox pinged with inquiries. A boutique hotel on Bainbridge Island, a tech startup wanting a meditation lounge, a celebrity chef looking to revamp a cooking set. One message, subject line major retail collaboration, came from a national furniture brand I'd idolized since design school. "Don't float away, Emma. Your feet need to stay on these new floors." When the last guest left, I locked the door, leaned my back against the cool glass, and let the quiet settle. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from adrenaline's afterglow. I pressed my palm flat to the oak and whispered, "We did it, Dad." 2 days later, I met Mom at a cafe halfway between her office and the showroom. I chose the patio so the open sky could dilute any claustrophobia between us. She arrived 5 minutes late, cardigan buttoned to her throat despite the gentle spring heat. One hand stayed curled around her purse strap like a lifeline. I slid a typed agreement across the metal tabletop. "These are my boundaries," I said softly. "Weekly family therapy, honesty about finances, and you don't set foot in my business without an invite." Her eyes flicked over the clauses. "Therapy," she echoed, lips tight. "It's this or nothing," I replied, voice calm but unyielding. A sparrow hopped onto the empty chair beside her, head tilted. She didn't notice. At last she nodded, shoulders sinking. "All right," she whispered. "I'll try." "Really?" "I want my daughter back. I'm still here, just no longer for sale." She reached out, fingertips grazing my knuckles, then drew back as if burned. Tears glazed her eyes, but I saw something softer, smaller, perhaps the first crack in her fortress. Showroom, week 3. The collaboration contract arrived. 6 figures for designing a flagship restorative living collection. I danced barefoot across the sunroom, phone in one hand, the other raised to the skylight. The post of me twirling, captioned "Worth Every Splinter," crossed 1 million views in 48 hours. Ryan showed up on a Tuesday evening, cheeks flushed from his shift at a hardware store. He carried the wooden sign he'd given me weeks earlier, now sanded smooth and stained walnut to match the showroom beams. "I thought it should look permanent," he said, eyes shy. I mounted it above the entry, the house that wouldn't quit. When the drill whirred into the cedar, Ryan flinched, old nerves, but he didn't step back. He held the ladder steady, jaw set in quiet pride. Later we sat on the porch steps, watching sailboats carve white lines across the water. "I get a 30-day chip next week," he said, rolling it between his fingers. "Feels like breathing without a weight belt." I nudged his shoulder. "Keep breathing." He smiled, and for the first time I believed the curve would last. That Friday, Jake asked me to meet him at the public dock at sunset. The sky smudged apricot, lilac, then deep indigo as we walked to the pier's end. City lights flickered on like distant fireflies. He knelt, no grand speeches, no hidden photographer, just a simple ring catching the last thread of daylight. Tears blurred the horizon, my knees bent, shoulders folding toward him like petals at dusk. I whispered yes against his hair, the lake lapping applause around us. We planned something small, a backyard ceremony, friends, laughter, no drama. Boundaries etched as clearly as the shoreline. Weeks bled into months. Contractors became friends, friends became clients, and the showroom thrummed with life. Sometimes Mom and I left therapy sessions raw and silent, sometimes laughing at memories we excavated like buried marbles. Progress wasn't linear, it zigged and sagged, but for the first time she listened more than she spoke. Grandma visited on a bright June morning, cane tapping the hallway tile. She traced the gold letters on Ryan's sign and whispered, "Stubbornness runs in the blood, doesn't it?" Then she squeezed my hand, the papery skin warm and strong. I used to think survival was about holding on. Turns out it's about knowing when to let go, too. One evening, after a long client consult, I stood alone in the showroom. The pendant lights glowed like moons, casting soft circles on the floor. I spun slowly, absorbing every detail. The faint lavender scent from diffusers, the hum of the HVAC, the reflection of my silhouette in the glass cabinet doors. I thought of all the people who had poured into this space, online strangers, old professors, new mentors, Ryan, Mom, Dad's memory, and the version of Emma who once paced this room in tear-stained jeans, wondering if restoration was possible. I whispered a promise to that girl. We did more than survive. We created. The air felt electric, as if somewhere beyond the walls, the universe nodded back. But even as contracts stacked and healing began, I could feel a new tension forming, like pressure behind a dam. Therapy had opened doors Mom and I weren't entirely prepared to walk through. Her apologies were real, yet fragile. Ryan's sobriety was new, and temptation lurked in shadows we hadn't swept, and deep inside, I knew the hardest work was still ahead, turning tentative peace into lasting change. Tomorrow's session would test whether the cracks could hold or fracture us all again. The therapist's office smelled like cinnamon and old carpet. Dr. Hayes had one of those ticking wall clocks that always seemed too loud during silences, and today silence filled the space like fog. Mom sat to my left on the faded blue love seat, hands folded tightly in her lap, a string of pearls digging into her throat. Ryan slouched beside her, bouncing one knee, eyes darting between me and the framed diploma on the wall. I took the solo armchair across from them, legs crossed, palms on my thighs, grounding myself. Dr. Hayes looked up from her notepad, her glasses catching the afternoon light that filtered through half-closed blinds. "Let's begin where we left off," she said gently. "Linda, last week you said you had something you wanted to share." Mom's throat moved as she swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. "I was scared," she said, staring down at her lap, "of losing Ryan, of watching everything fall apart. I thought if I just took control, I could fix it before Emma ever had to know." Micro-action. Her fingers tightened until the pearls clicked softly against her ring. Ryan shifted beside her, rubbing his thumb along the seam of his jeans. "And I let her," he muttered, "because I didn't want to face it alone." I breathed in slowly, the room smelling faintly of peppermint tea from Dr. Hayes's desk. Inner monologue. I should feel better. This is what I wanted, for them to admit it. But the truth, now out in the open, felt like a bruise being pressed. "I didn't need you to protect me," I said, my voice even. "I needed you to trust me." Mom's eyes flicked up. "I didn't know how. I've always been the fixer. Since your father died, I've been the glue. I didn't realize how brittle I'd become." Dr. Hayes leaned forward slightly. "It's hard to step back when fear makes control feel like safety, but rebuilding trust means letting go of that illusion." Mom nodded slowly. "I hurt you. I know that. And I'm not asking for forgiveness all at once. But I want to earn a place in your life again, on your terms." She looked at me then, really looked. No defenses, no blame, just exhaustion and hope. It was the first time I'd seen her without her armor. I exhaled. "Then stop talking to me like a project you failed, and start talking to me like your daughter." She nodded once, lips pressed tight. Dr. Hayes turned to Ryan. "And you?" He cleared his throat. "I'm 5 weeks clean. I've been going to meetings, working through the steps. I'm not going to pretend I've got it all figured out, but I'm showing up." I gave him a small nod. "That's all I've ever wanted." Later, outside in the parking lot, we stood in the golden haze of early evening. The air carried the scent of cherry blossoms from the nearby trees. Mom touched my arm gently. "Dinner next week?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, small steps." Ryan raised a hand in farewell, then turned toward his bus stop. Mom got into her car, but before she drove off, she rolled down the window. "Emma," she said, "I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud." My throat tightened. I managed a quiet, "Thank you." Inner monologue. I didn't trust her completely. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to yet. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, even if we were limping. That weekend, Grandma Evelyn hosted Sunday dinner again, the first since everything. The dining room was lit with soft lamps, her antique china laid out like a ceremony. Roast chicken, glazed carrots, and apple pie filled the air with nostalgia. But it wasn't the food, it was the presence that mattered. Aunt Clara brought a casserole in her usual dry humor. Ryan set the table, folding the napkins into tiny boats, something he'd learned in therapy group. And Mom? She listened. She asked questions. She laughed softly at one of Ryan's stories and didn't interrupt when I mentioned an upcoming project. It was cautious, awkward, but it was something. At one point, Grandma raised a glass of iced tea and said, "To the mess that made us honest." We all chuckled, but the silence afterward carried weight and gratitude. That night, I met with Dr. Hayes one-on-one. "I feel freer," I told her, but also tired, like I've been holding up a wall for years and finally got permission to rest. She smiled. That's the cost of survival. You don't realize how heavy the armor is until you take it off. We talked about boundaries, about choosing peace over performance, about how forgiveness isn't linear, and how healing isn't a reward, but a daily practice. I found myself staring at a framed print behind her. The cracks are where the light gets in, I smiled. I used to hate the cracks. Now? She asked. Now I'm learning to fill them with gold. A week later, I hosted a design workshop at the lake house for young women, starting out in interior design. 10 of them filled the sunroom, clipboards in hand, eyes wide with hunger and hope. I shared stories, not just of paint and fabric, but of rebuilding, of betrayal, of claiming your space. I told them that beauty doesn't just come from symmetry, it comes from survival. One girl stayed after. She was 18, shy, hair tucked behind one ear. My dad says design's not a real career, she said, eyes lowered. But your story, it makes me want to try anyway. I handed her a business card. Then try, loudly, she smiled. Thanks, Ms. Lawson. That night I sat on the porch steps with Jake. The lake shimmered beneath a waxing moon. He wrapped an arm around me. You're glowing, he said. I'm tired. Still glowing. I laid my head on his shoulder. Do you think people like us ever really escape the gravity of where we came from? He kissed my forehead. I think we learn to use it, like fuel. A shooting star streaked across the sky, disappearing into the dark. Inner monologue. We were far from perfect, but we were honest. We were healing. And I wasn't afraid of the cracks anymore. But even in peace, old echoes linger. And just when I thought I'd found solid ground, an unexpected discovery was waiting. Quiet, hidden, and powerful enough to shake everything I thought was behind me. The night before the grand opening, I roamed the lake house one last time in silence, barefoot on oak floors that gleamed like still water. Every room pulsed with soft anticipation, the gentle hum of hidden speakers, the scent of cedar cabinets mingling with a hint of vanilla wax. Outside, the moon drew a bright path across Lake Washington, as if it wanted an invitation, too. I traced my fingertips along the hand-carved sign above the foyer, the house that wouldn't quit, and whispered a promise to keep listening to its heartbeat long after the applause faded. Morning arrived wrapped in gold. The sun slipped through skylights and hit the brass hardware just right, scattering flecks of warm light onto the walls. I tied my hair back, smoothed the lapels of my ivory blazer, and inhaled. Cinnamon rolls baked in the kitchen for the first wave of guests, their sweetness swirling through the air like a greeting. By 10 o'clock, the driveway filled with cars and laughter. Clients filtered in first, eyes widening at the sunroom's glass ceiling, their astonishment catching me off guard every time. Then friends arrived, faces I'd cried with, painted with, stayed up late drafting plans with, and finally, family. Ryan, Grandma Evelyn clutching her cane in one hand and a bouquet of lavender in the other, and Aunt Clara smiling like she'd just watched a sunrise. Ryan looked 6 months lighter, shoulders squared, eyes clear as lake water. He slipped an embossed envelope into my palm. "A 6-month chip belongs on display," he murmured. The coin inside, silver and steady, caught the light and my breath. Linda came too. True to our agreement, she entered quietly, chose a chair in the corner, and folded her hands in her lap. She wore no pearls today, just a simple blouse and the faintest fragile smile. She met my gaze from across the room and nodded once, as though acknowledging the ground rules we'd written in therapy: truth, space, choice. At noon, Jake rang a small brass bell, and the hum of conversation tapered into an expectant hush. He took my hand and guided me to the farmhouse table, now draped in a cascade of eucalyptus branches and taper candles. "Everyone," he said, voice steady, "the woman of the hour." Applause rose, gentle yet thunderous. My pulse hammered, but I breathed the cedar-sweet air and spoke. "Almost 2 years ago," I began, "this house was little more than peeling paint and a shaky porch." Laughter rippled, heads nodded, but in its bones I heard a whisper of what it could become if someone believed in it. I thought I'd be that someone alone. Turns out, the someone was all of you. Eyes shimmered back at me, friends, mentors, strangers, turned allies. I let them see the tears that pooled, not of sorrow, but completion. I stand here because a community lifted these walls, because a brother chose honesty over fear. Ryan swallowed hard, chin trembling. Because a mother faced the mirror and decided change is braver than control. Linda's eyes glistened, but she held them steady. And because my father's memory reminded me that dreams don't shrink to fit other people's comfort. A collective sigh swept the room. Aunt Clara dabbed her eyes, Grandma squeezed my hand, and even Linda bowed her head as if in silent agreement. Ryan raised a flute of sparkling cider. "To Emma," he said, voice strong, "for teaching us that rebuilding begins the moment you decide the wreckage still matters." Glasses clinked, reflecting sunflecks across beaming faces. The celebration spilled onto the lawn, where food trucks lined the drive and a jazz trio played under string lights. I watched from the porch, letting the music wrap around me like a favorite sweater. Linda approached, stopping at the first step. She smiled, a small quiver of relief flickering across her features, and rejoined the guests. As dusk melted into violet, Jake took my hand and led me down the dock. Lanterns bobbed on the water, reflecting a sky peppered with early stars. He pressed his forehead to mine. "Home base secured," he whispered. "Ready for the next adventure?" I nodded. "As long as the launch pad's here." We sat side by side, toes skimming the water's surface, talking about everything and nothing, future design tours, kids someday, the idea of turning the detached garage into a workshop for scholarship recipients. The night folded around us, soft and sure. Later, inside the quiet house, I posted my final update. I positioned the camera in the sunroom, string lights twinkling behind me, and hit record. "This isn't just a victory lap," I began, voice calm, heart full. "It's a beacon. If you're watching this, wondering whether you have it in you to reclaim a stolen dream, believe me, you do. Your worth isn't defined by the hands that tried to dim your light. It's written in how fiercely you fight to keep it burning." I panned to the open doorway, lanterns glowing beyond. "I'm Emma Lawson, and this is my legacy. A house that survived betrayal to become a sanctuary. A family that chose honesty over silence. A community that proves kindness is louder than cruelty." I ended with a smile. If this story lit a spark in you, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring that bell, because we have so many more spaces to transform together. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that second chances build the strongest foundations. And tell me in the comments, what dream are you ready to reclaim? I paused, letting the camera linger on the ambient glow, then clicked stop. Outside, a lone loon called across the lake, haunting, hopeful. I pressed my palm against the cool glass door, feeling the tremor of its cry echo inside me. The house was alive, and so was I. When I turned back, I caught my reflection in the tall mirror by the entry. Shoulders no longer hunched, eyes clear, posture steady. A woman who'd rebuilt not just a home, but every room in her heart. And somewhere in the dim hallway, the cracks softly gleamed with gold.